Hello, and we're live. Thank you so much for joining. We can start with some introductions while people are still joining, and please feel free to continue writing where you're joining us from and what your job is. I'm Nadia, product engineer at Intercom. This year, I was endorsed for the Global Talent Visa, and I became, first of all, very excited about having this visa, but also I became so fascinated with the opportunities that this visa gives. And I started sharing my experience and learnings about it on my YouTube channel and also here on LinkedIn. And I think that the biggest issue with this visa is that there are two issues. So one is that some people think that it's very hard to get and that it's only for people who have Nobel Prizes or something like that. But also another issue is that a lot of people still have never heard of it and still don't really know that it exists. So I have decided to fix this in the way that I can and to publicly interview people who have received this visa so that you can all learn and get inspired by their stories and hopefully be inspired enough to actually start the process of working on your visa and getting it, hopefully. So today we have our guest is Andrey Goncharov, a software engineer working at Meta, Facebook, who also got this visa this year and who kindly agreed to share his story with you today. Thank you so much for joining.
It's my pleasure. Hello, everybody. Andrey, nice to meet you all. The last name was unpronounceable, so it's fine to shorten it by calling me Andrey G, or just Andrey. I'm a software engineer at Meta, have been there for 1 year. A huge fan of open source. I want to be speaker and writer. I think that pretty much covers it.
Can we start with talking a little bit about where you're from originally, when you came to the UK, and how it happened?
Okay. I'm from, let's call it the middle of nowhere, in a country that must not be named. It's Russia. And the city, it's halfway between Moscow and Sochi. You must know Moscow. You probably know Sochi. That's where we had Winter Olympics. And the city itself is Voronezh. And doubtfully heard the name. It's fairly large by Russian standards, but nowhere near the size of the capital. As to when I came to the UK, it was almost exactly a year ago. I think it was August the 2nd of 2021, in the middle of pandemic, like me. And as to how, well, I've done a research before that, probably a year before that. I've done a research trying to figure out where I'd like to relocate, like not just by hearsay or my personal stereotypes, but I wanted to have some numeric data that I could easily quantify and sort by. So I've done that. Not massive, but extensive research trying to figure out where I'd like to be. And later, once I figure out the final list of countries where I could be, and that was quite a surprising list in my view in the end. I started applying to various positions to different companies, sent about 400 resumes to, I know, about probably 300, 400 positions, tortured recruiters, everyone I could reach out to. And in the end, I've got an offer from London, from Facebook.
Amazing. You said you created a list of countries. Which countries were on that list?
Let me look it up. And in the meantime, actually, I can share the link to the research if you're interested. It's kind of dated, maybe a bit, but I think that it still could provide some value, hopefully. So I think the final list for me was, let's see, it was Netherlands, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Sweden, Singapore, Germany, and Austria. And I was still considering the USA, but to be honest, it wasn't I was hoping that I would get an offer elsewhere.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that a lot of software engineers kind of have this idea of the United States being the ultimate destination. So in terms of that list, would you say that the UK was kind of close to the top of the list?
Yeah, probably. I think that among these countries, my favorite were the UK, Canada, and Netherlands. Um, I didn't go out on a limb and say that it was the UK and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
it felt that the UK was probably the best destination because it was in the middle. I kind of felt, and I'm still feeling that London is somewhat in the middle of the world. You can easily travel to the US on a single direct flight to either New York or San Francisco. You can travel across Europe freely. You can fly to Asia, yet once again on a single direct flight. So London seems like a perfect destination.
Do you think that in terms of career opportunities for software engineers, London is like the top place in Europe or close to the top? Because in my personal view, I think that London is probably the best place to relocate if you are interested in growing your career as a software engineer, just because of how many opportunities there are and how easy it is to find a new job, to change jobs.
Probably, I'd say that if we're talking about Europe, then I think, yeah, London is probably the greatest tech hub in Europe. I'd say that Amsterdam and Berlin, they come as close next. But probably the opportunities in the US, they are still unparalleled anyway in the world. But with the immigration system, it wasn't something I was willing to truly consider back then.
Yeah, so for context, for people who are not really familiar, so the immigration system to the United States is actually much harder to get through than the immigration to the UK, mostly in terms because there are limits on how many work visas they grant per year. So you will often hear stories of people who are trying to get the H-1B visa, the work visa, there for years, and it's also done in the way of a lottery. So it's very hard to get in. And
it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. You get an offer from a top company, and in the end, you're being told that you can't get into the country because of the lottery. I don't know. It seems weird.
Yeah, to me, it never really made sense because I understand the green card lottery, right? The diversity visa lottery. But then this one is a work immigration. And once you have the offer, you should be able to come in. But this is not what happened. So a lot of people are stuck in the circle of trying to get into the United States and never really get in there. So I think that in the UK, the advantage is that there are no limits on how many work visas the government grants, and also there are no limits on how many global talent visas the government grants as well. So at least for now, so this might change, but for now, I think that immigrating to the UK for a software engineer with experience is much easier. So going back to the moment that you said that you got an offer from Facebook, this must have been like super exciting. It was in 2021, right? Or 2020?
Yeah, it was the beginning of 2021. Yes.
Yeah. So what kind of process did you go through to get this first initial visa to come here?
Honestly, not much. I think it was well, I had to get my English tested. So I went through IELTS to prove my English level. Also, I think that since Russia is considered a third world country, or high risk tuberculosis country, I had to get tuberculosis tested. Oh, hard! It's really hard to pronounce the name. Tuberculosis. Okay, I think I nailed it. Apart from that, I think I had to get my marriage certificate. And I think that was it pretty much. Maybe also get a list of my previous employers, but it was mostly covered by Facebook, so they took care of everything. Pretty much, I just sent the document somewhere, and they did their magic.
Yeah. So it was the skilled worker visa, right?
Yeah, it was the skilled worker one. Um, by that time, I already knew about global talent, but I thought that it was easier to kind of go with the flow, go with the standard procedure, and then later on figure out if I can transfer to the global talent one.
Okay, so I already knew about the visa. So you were on this skilled worker visa for a while, and I know a lot of people who spend, 5 years on the skilled worker visa, and they're perfectly happy with it. So why did you decide to change visas and to apply for the global talent visa if you already had a visa that was covered by your employer, all paid for, right?
Yeah, it was all paid, covered, so I didn't have to lift a finger pretty much to get this visa. And as to why, well, I'm a curious person by nature, so before uh, before I got the offer, I've already done the research as to on which visa types exists in different countries. And I already knew that the UK had this global talent visa. So I already knew about the advantages, potential advantages. So it felt like a no-brainer to at least try. What's the downside of trying? Well, maybe you can spend some more money, but money um, is that resource that you can kind of refill over time. And it's not that much money to apply to the visa in the first place. So if you um, get denied the visa, the endorsement, you lose only about 450 quid, which is, well, it's a substantial amount of money, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. I think that this is the basically around £500 is basically what you pay to have your application considered to be endorsed. And if you get refused, this is the money that you lose, but that's kind of all the money that you lose. But if you get endorsed, then you will need to pay a whole lot more money, probably, or your employer will cover it. But basically, this is what you need to get started. I think this is something that is important to keep in mind. So, what you mentioned that you already knew the advantages of this visa over the skilled worker visa. So, could you tell us a little bit about the advantages that you saw, and what was the biggest motivator for you to go through the process to collect all the dozens
Mhm.
of documents? Yeah.
Um, well, I think that the greatest advantage that um, why most people apply to this visa is that you get your ILR, indefinite leave to remain, basically like permanent um, residency in 3 years instead of 5. And that means that you are no longer, well, you're kind of like a citizen without the right to vote and without the passport. At least that's how I imagine it in my head. So you have unlimited rights on on what you can do in the UK. You can leave the country for a very long time. I'm not sure about indefinitely, but you can certainly leave the country for extended period of time and get back. And getting that thing in 3 years instead of 5 sounds like magic and a very good reason to apply. Another thing is that you get your citizenship, which which I really wanted, in 5 years instead of 6. 1 year is not really a deal breaker, but well, I mean, if you can get that on top of having ILR faster, why not? And one last thing, well, not one, actually two. Um, I wasn't really planning on leaving Meta, and I'm still not planning leaving Meta in any foreseeable future. Um, it's a great job, by the way. So reach out if you need a referral. Um, but still, I'm one of these people who likes having Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D for every Plan A and for every Plan B, kind of a recursive structure. Um, and I just wanted to have those guarantees that if I ever decide to leave my employer, I won't be kicked out of the country, or if my employer decides to get rid of me for some reason, I'll still have the right to stay in the country. Um, and while on skilled worker visa, if you if you are fired, I think you have a very narrow time window to
Yeah.
find a new employer to sponsor your visa. I'm not sure about the exact time, but I think it's about 2 months or something like that.
Yeah, it's 60 days. Yeah.
60 days, okay. And well, yeah, probably you can find a new job as a software engineer in 60 days. But what kind of job is it going to be? That's a huge question. Um, and one last thing, apart from the guarantees, the ILR, and citizenship, is that you can start your own business on the Global Talent Visa. Um, and I'm not sure I'm that entrepreneurship kind of guy with that mindset, but it's still nice to have that perk if I ever decide to go down that route. So I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, I would say that I've had very similar reasons for applying for the visa. For me, the peace of mind was very important. I think that I didn't quite realize before I moved here how stressful it would be for me to be on this visa, because previously, when I was living back in Poland, I kind of had all the rights, and I felt like I could do anything. Basically, I could have my own company, I could change jobs, I could go study, I could just take a break from work. And when I moved to the UK, I saw that I really lost some of those rights in a way. And I fully agree with you that it is possible for a software engineer living in London to find a new job in 60 days. But I think that the person who is already in this position of being pressed for time, and somebody who needs to find a job urgently, is not coming into this job search from a position of strength or abundance. And this person will likely be making not the best decisions. And also, I think that the employers would really sense the desperation in a way. And I really didn't want to be in this situation ever. I wanted to have my peace of mind. I knew that the process would be difficult and expensive, but I also knew that I just want to have the visa sorted. I knew that after that I can apply for the permanent residency, and this is something that was very important to me. But also having an opportunity to have my own business, to have like a side hustle. This was something that was very important for me, and this is something that you can't really do on the skilled worker visa. I know that there are ways to do it through a lawyer, and also sometimes people do some like shady ways to start a business while they're on this visa, but this is not the intention of the skilled worker visa. So if you get the skilled worker visa, the intention is that you work for your employer, and then if your employer fires you, or you decide to quit your job, or there is a layoff like there have been recently in many companies, then you're in a position where you don't have a visa anymore, and you need to find somebody who will make you a new visa. So this won't be like an extension of the old one. It will be a whole new process. So I think that it's important to bear this in mind, to understand why people are switching to global talent. And also, if you are listening to this and you are already in Great Britain and you have the skilled worker visa, if any of those things sound like a problem for you, then I think that you should probably look into this visa and how you can get it. So when did you decide to apply for this visa? When was it?
Yeah, and before I answer this question, I'd like to add a tiny note that neither me nor Nadia are lawyers or have any legal degrees. So if you think that you want to start a side hustle on your skilled worker visa, it still might be possible with a lawyer. And well, you better ask a qualified professional. So everything that we say is based on our own research and our own experience. And one other thing is that I see lots of questions in comments. We are going to get back to these questions at the end of the interview, so we don't kind of break the narrative. So no worries, we are going to get back to every single question. And now to your question, Nadia, is about when. So I think it happened for me after working at Facebook for about 5-6 months. It was January. I've got back from a nice, relaxing vacation, and I thought that it was the perfect time to start a new adventure, a new challenge. So I think that I started preparing my case at the end of January. I submitted my documents at the end of February. And it took me maybe at the beginning of February. Well, nevertheless, It took Technation about a month to consider my application and get back with their results.
Mm-hmm. So the decision itself was very quick. I would say it usually is much quicker than it takes you to prepare the documents, I think. So what did your process look like for applying for this visa? How did you gather the information? How did you prepare the documents? Like, what was it like for you?
Well, I got lucky. I've got a friend who already had this visa, and he was kind enough to walk me through the process. So I already had some vague idea about which documents I need to supply. I also read a great guide on TechNation's website. I'm going to send the link in the chat. Give me a second. There we go. This is the link in the comments. And that gave me a rough idea of what it's going to look like. I tried to search the web, trying to find some information, some concrete details about which documents exactly people supplied, but the information there was scarce at best. So in the end, what I did is I submitted 3 recommendation letters. I also drafted a bio. I submitted my CV, which was kind of an amended CV specifically for this application, not my regular one. It was kind of my regular one with a short list of my most notable what's the word? English is failing me today. Achievements. Yeah, that's the word. And what else? And I also submitted some evidence documents. These are separate PDFs. For me, it was 10 PDFs. To be honest, I could have gone with 9, and that was all I needed. But I thought that, well, I have one more, and I just thought that, why not? It wasn't really, I don't think that it mattered much, but over time, I collected quite a few recommendations on LinkedIn, and I just screenshotted some of them, and that was my last document. And I can't hear you for some reason. Wonderful. Is that me?
Okay.
And now I can hear you.
Yeah. So basically, just for context, so if you are going to apply for the Global Talent Visa, so first tip is that you should always consult the TechNation Visa Guide, which is the single source of truth for all things related to the visa. So even if you hear us say something, you should always double check that this is still valid because this guide changes. But generally, you can think of the application is consisting of a couple of blocks of documents. So you will have your CV. As Andrey mentioned, this is a CV that you specifically write for the Global Talent Visa. It's not your regular CV. This is one where you basically try to portray yourself in the most favorable light. So you focus on your most impressive achievements, but only on the things that are relevant for the visa, because there is a page limit there. I think it's around 3 pages, and it's kind of hard to just get too much stuff in there. So then the second block of documents is the letters of recommendation, and I will next ask Andrey to tell us a little bit more about which people wrote the letters for him and what the letters more or less should say. And then there are 10. There's the personal statement also. It's kind of a bio, and then there is the 10 documents that are called evidences that you can upload. You can upload up to 10, so you can have fewer. But I think that usually people try to get as many of them as possible in to make the case stronger. So moving on to the letters, moving back to the letters. So who were your experts who wrote you the letters, and how did you approach them? How did you ask them for letters, and what was it like to get somebody to write you a letter of recommendation?
For me, I think that in that very guide on TechNation.io, they mentioned that they want you to provide recommendation letters from ideally some top level execs. That wasn't, but personally, I don't think that at every company you really can get an exec. write you a letter and really know what you've been working on to have any kind of say or understanding of what you've been doing. So I know if it was wise or not, but I tried to contact people who were as high as possible in that career ladder, but still have some sort of an understanding of what I've been doing in the company. And for me, that usually were my skip level managers. So, well, we have my direct manager, and the manager of my manager is my skip level manager. So these people, they are usually they were the ones who I contacted. Um, so that was my skip level manager at Meta. That was one of the people who wrote a recommendation. Another person was a VP of engineering at my previous startup at Hazelcast. And well, we already got kind of a top level exec, but since the company is very small, he was basically my skip level manager. Um, and one last recommendation came from the CEO of my last startup. And yeah, we have a high level exec, but he was almost like my direct manager because the startup was tiny. And as to how I approach them, well, basically, I think that I messaged even more people than just those three, because you never know if, well, these people, they're usually busy, especially if it's a CEO of a new startup, right? Um, so I messaged a few, probably 5, 6 people, asking if they'll be willing to write a recommendation for me. Luckily, all of them replied yes. And at that moment, I knew that it was crucial to remind them of my previous achievements, because for some people, it's been more than a year from the moment they last saw me at work. So how could they even know what of my achievements or remember anything? So what I did, once they agreed, I sent them a list of the projects and my most notable achievements, so they could have, well, to remind them um, about my achievements and what to write in their recommendation letters. I also tried to provide some guidance on the structure, because Tech Nation, they want the letters to have a certain structure when people introduce themselves, when they describe your achievements in the company and how you impacted the company, how you impacted the project. And then last, they, based on their guide, they want the recommenders to write how you would benefit the tech scene in the UK, which I would say is not a part of a regular recommendation letter. And also, don't forget to attach CV for every person that recommends you. For me, I just screenshotted their LinkedIn's, and that was enough. But if they don't have a LinkedIn, ask them for their CV.
Yeah, so I would mention two things here. So first of all, what is important here is that, as Andrey said, even though the Tech Nation Visa Guide mentions that those have to be executives or C-level stuff, and also I've heard people say that they contacted some lawyers in the UK who said that if you don't have access to the CEO of your company, then we won't be working with your case because this won't work for the visa. This is actually not the case at all. I think for a lot of people, especially working at big companies like Google or Facebook, there is no way for a person to get a recommendation letter from a C-level person, you know. So I think that it doesn't have to be anyone quite as high up the career ladder. I would say that if you're working at a smaller startup, then yes, it has to be somebody who maybe ideally a founder or a CEO or somebody like that, or a CTO. But then there, I think it's more informal. It usually is easier to get somebody to write you a letter. So just think of how high you can go in your company. It always helps to work on your network within the company. So for instance, if you are interested in getting this visa in the future, and right now you are working in a big company and you don't know anybody outside of your manager, then I would advise you to try to find a way to meet at least your skip level managers or your manager's manager or somebody higher and establish a relationship with them so that they at least know who you are. Ideally, ask them some intelligent questions about the company, your work, or your projects, and try to build a relationship, because a lot of this process is about you using your network. And if you don't have a network right now, it's not the end of the world, but you should really start working on it now before you need letters, because sometimes if you reach out to somebody and you have never spoken to them, it will feel a little bit weird to ask them to write you a letter. Because ideally, I mean, not ideally, the requirement of the technician is that this person has to be aware of your work. So they should be talking about things that they know about. And the second thing that Andrey mentioned is that those people everybody is busy, and also people don't really remember the project that you worked on. I think that even you probably yourself don't really remember everything about every project that you worked on. So it always helps to create a draft of the letter that they can work with and improve. And this is a very common way how people approach those letters. You create a draft of the project that you worked on and kind of your achievements, the metrics. And the third thing is that it's very important to follow the format that the technician has. You can't really just have an old letter that somebody wrote for you for another application. You should really make sure that you follow the format exactly. And it just has to be done really exactly. So cool. I also wanted to go back to the evidences. So you mentioned that you submitted 10 documents, 10 PDF documents. So what were they like? We don't have to mention all of them, but what were they? I think it might help if you say which criteria you chose for this visa. So again, for a little bit of context, but we don't need to go into the details, but the technician, they specify the criteria that you need to meet in order to get the visa. And the criteria, to me, were probably the most confusing part of the whole process. So maybe you can mention which criteria you chose and which kinds of documents did you submit?
Yeah, sure. So for me, picking a criteria, it was confusing at first, but at the end it was a no-brainer really, because I think that they have one mandatory and four optional criteria. At least that's how it was back then. Well, not to spread hearsay, let me actually find these criteria. So for exceptional talent, it could be either a proven record for innovation as a founder or a senior executive, and that wasn't me, clearly. It could be proof of recognition for work beyond the applicant's occupation. Kind of, maybe. They have made significant technical, commercial, or entrepreneurial contributions to the field. And that would be as a founder, senior executive board member, or an employee of a company. And that, if we count employee, that could be me also. And one last thing was exceptional ability in the field by academic contribution, and that wasn't me. So I kind of didn't really have a choice. I had only two possible criteria that I had too much. And as to how I approached them, well, over the years, I think that a few years ago, I heard about the US having the talent visas. I think it's called O2. And I figured that why shouldn't over the years I build the case for potential immigration? I heard maybe somewhere on the web, I read a few stories of people doing that without winning a Nobel Prize or something, just by leveraging their existing work and the right lawyers. So I already had in mind that if I never done a proper research, but I kind of figured that if I do conferences, some open source work, and maybe serve as a jury somewhere on some maybe programming competition or a conference, that should be enough. And for me, in my case, I was a conference program committee member. I spoke at several conferences, and I provided an extensive list of all conferences, and highlighted some of them, the major events with the viewership numbers, with some references to contact the organizers of these conferences to prove that I indeed spoke there and to prove the number of attendees of these conferences. What else? I also have um, semi-live, almost dead, well, let's call it barely live technical blog, which still has some viewership thanks to Reddit and Hacker News. So I mentioned my blog there. Once again, I provided a link to my entire profile and also highlighted a few articles, a few blog posts with the most significant numbers. I also calculated the total number of views, which added up to be something pretty, it was a pretty significant number. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was over 100,000. And yeah, just a reminder, if you have like a dozen of blog posts, each one of them might not be a huge hit on the web, but when you add them up, the final number of views, it could be something significant. What else? I also linked my open source libraries and even single commits to some open source projects. If you don't have a library, it's not the end of the world. I think that it's perfectly fine to, I don't know, pick up a few GitHub issues here and there and start contributing to open source. Like now, if you don't have a case now, if you don't have, well, as Nadia said, if you don't know your skip level manager now, or if you don't have any conferences on your resume, it's not too late to start now and build your case over time. In my view, you could do that in 6-ish months, maybe in a year. And one last thing, well, I also provided some designs, high-level designs and design description, design documents for the projects I used to work on. Luckily, these projects, they were open source, so I could link concrete commits. But I think that it's totally okay to provide high-level descriptions of the systems that you've been involved with that are private and you can't really disclose every technical detail. You can't really disclose the code. But in that case, I'd probably provide also some person of contact, some POC to reach out to, so TechNation could verify that you indeed worked on this system. And in that case, I'd probably provide an email of a manager that oversees the development of this system. And yeah, one last thing, I think it was contracts with Facebook and what my previous startups. I was lucky enough to, well, when you work in IT in Russia, it's quite common to surpass that median salary. So, and I think that one of the criteria on TechNation's website is to provide that you are high, that you are a skilled professional.
High salary, yeah.
Yeah, that you have high salary. And there I provided my contracts, and I also provided links to some research that mentions the average salary in the region. Because, well, if you come from the middle of nowhere, just like me, TechNation can't really, they don't really know what's the normal amount of money there. So I definitely link to some research saying that this is X is what people get on average there, and I made like, I don't know, 3X.
Yeah, I think it's you've dropped a lot of wisdom in this short answer. So I just loved a lot of the things that you said. So a couple of them really stuck with me. So one thing that I often talk about on my channel, and I will drop a link to the playlist in the chat. I talk about the fact that a lot of people, when they read the requirements for the TechNation visa, for the global talent visa, so it's the second name is TechNation visa. So they get really intimidated because they read the list of requirements and they think, okay, I don't have this, so this visa is not for me. And what I try to share on my channel and with my blog post is something that I think Andrea mentioned as well, is that if you don't have those things right now, your life or your career, they're not static. like you can still try to change those things, and you can start doing those things right now, so that in 6 months, or I think that like if you really crunch, like if you really have to do it like super urgently, then you can do it like 3-4 months. 6 months is okay. I think 12 months is, you can do it pretty easily and in a relaxed fashion, and you can start doing those things that will help you build a stronger case for the Tech Nation visa. There are so many different criteria that you can, I mean, there are so many different things that you can choose to do. You can find something that you have always wanted to do, but maybe you never really, had this external motivation to try it. And I hope that maybe this live stream will be your external motivation to finally do the thing that you always wanted. So I also made a couple of commits to open source. It was, I don't know, like 2 pull requests that got merged. And it doesn't have to be anything major with open source. It's great if you have a big project that you have done on your own, but also if you haven't, it's not a problem. You can start contributing to open source now and doing small things, finding small issues that you can close. And if you're not interested in that, you can start doing other things. You can do a conference talk. It doesn't have to be even a conference. It can be a local meetup. You can start really small. And what Andrey did here is that he started doing those things well in advance. And then when he had to apply for the visa, you kind of, you already had the documents. You already had the case. You just needed to find documents to prove it. And if you already have done those things, getting the documents is usually easy. But if you don't have the documents yet, you can start doing the things that will enable you to get the documents. So the documents are either found or made in this sense. So I think that you need to kind of adopt a growth mentality here with this visa. It can be such a great inspiration for somebody to go out there and do the things that are outside your comfort zone. Try something new, try public speaking, try mentoring, try volunteering, and all of those great things that you aren't really required to do at your day-to-day job, but things that maybe you are drawn to. But then, you can also use them to build a stronger case for this visa. So this was one thought. And the second thought that you mentioned that I really liked was that it's great if you have something that is open source. In your case, you could just provide the link to the code. For a lot of us, the code that we work on is proprietary, so we can't really share it. But still, you can always find ways to show that you worked on some things that are impressive in the engineering sense. You can always describe them in high-level terms. You don't need to disclose any company secrets, especially if you have an NDA. You can't really do that. But you should just show that you should explain why this achievement was impressive, and then you can get a letter from your manager or for somebody else who will confirm that you actually worked on this thing and will vouch for you and give a stamp of approval on your claims that you have worked on it. So there are always ways to prove things that aren't really open source or are still protected by by some NDAs. So overall, I think that the general high-level thought here is that this visa forces you to be creative and to find ways to prove different achievements in creative ways, to really think through your whole career. So I don't know if you had this experience, but when I was working on my case, for me it was a difficult process because I also prepared all the documents myself, and it took a lot of time. But also it was a process of reflection and thinking about my career and the things that I have accomplished. It really made me feel pretty good about myself. I don't know if you had this experience as well.
Well, yeah, probably yes, in a way. But one thing I'd like to add there, you mentioned speaking at local meetups and stuff, and I'd like to remind you guys that we are living in a transformed world, transformed by COVID. So if you're living in the middle of nowhere like I did, when you don't really have that many tech communities to speak at, try to reach out to some online meetups and online conferences, or even start your own community. That's exactly what I did in Voronezh. I started my local Vue.js community to talk to the guys about JavaScript. And in the end, yes, I linked the talks that I'd done at my own meetup. So that still counts. It's still a meetup. And well, kind of the key to success is in your hands. If you don't have the environment, create the environment.
Yeah, I agree. I think I like this can-do attitude. I think that it's also cool that if you don't have something, if you don't have a meetup locally, you can create it. In the same case, you can create an online community, and then you can submit proof of you moderating an online community as one of the documents as well. So, for instance, if you are introverted and you don't really want to speak at conferences, in front of people, you can first of all do it online. I think it's much easier to do it over Zoom. But then also you can organize a community that is on Discord or Slack or Telegram or whatever. And this can also be used as proof, because if you're organizing a community, it means that you are mentoring people, you're teaching them. Even things like a Stack Overflow profile where you have a lot of answers and you have a high rating. This is something that you can use as well, because it shows you as spreading knowledge and teaching others. So I think that there is so much that you can do to build a stronger case for the visa if you're interested. So, sure, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I would also like to add that certain things that you do, they can be qualified as under multiple criteria. For instance, my publications, my blog posts, I put them under two criteria. I put them, some of the publications, they were technical, and I put them under recognized for my work outside of my immediate occupation. So like extracurricular, some extra activities that I've done outside of my work, technical wise. But also I put the same, well, not the same, well, the same activity, blogging, but different kind of blog posts when I tell people about immigration, when I tell people about my university business, under different criteria, under the criteria of well, actually, yeah, I think that the first one was made significant technical contribution. So I kind of tell people about tech, and that kind of I made a significant technical contribution. And at the same time, I listed it under the second criteria, recognized for my work outside of my immediate occupation, and kind of assessed that based on the number of years. And I think that I even mentioned under the mandatory criteria, which in mandatory criteria, I think you have to, well, let me look it up real quick, but I'm pretty sure that you have to show that you're a leading talent and that you're mentoring people, and the your posts about, well, even this live, when we tell people about global talent visa, we kind of indirectly mentoring people, right? Helping other engineers to improve their lives. So I would definitely include something like this in my application.
Yeah, too bad we already have the visas. But yeah, basically any kind of activity where you are sharing knowledge is something that you can use for your case as well. So I think that, I don't know, let us know in the comments. What do you think so far? Are you scared of trying to get this visa? Does this sound doable to you, or does this sound intimidating? I'm curious to learn. And while you're answering, what was the hardest thing for you in this whole process?
I think the hardest part was to kind of find some certainty to figure out how exactly these documents should look like, because I never really found a concrete example of how these documents could look like. After I finally made up my mind and got this visa myself, I even wrote a free blog post that I'm going to link in the comments. But even in that blog post, I think that I still left some parts out of it. And now I'm working on the new thing, like visa, global talent visa guide that to that role. And I'm going to link that thing in the comments as well. It's not released yet. It's kind of a pre-order kind of thing. Sorry, guys, this one is not free, but hopefully it's not too much. but I need to invest some extra time to write the examples of the documents, concrete examples for an imaginary case, for an imaginary guide. The concrete documents that I would have submitted for that guy's case to Tech Nation. And hopefully that would serve you as some templates that you could follow and you could apply to your own case. Why an imaginary guy? I think that Tech Nation, they mentioned specifically that they do some anti-plagiarism check or whatever. So even if they didn't, I'd be hesitant to share my own documents, not to endanger my visa. And if you got your own visa, I'd encourage you not to share your own documents. But I think that sharing some imaginary case is totally fine. So follow the link, and yeah, use a promo code pre-order to get a discount. I'm going to I make a solemn promise to finish the guide by the 1st of September, when you are going to receive a ping from me, and you'll be able to access all the documents and get back to me with your feedback.
Yeah, that's actually very great, because when I was preparing documents for my visa, and I was doing it myself. So what I did is that I read everything that there was online. Actually, I read your blog post that you just shared, and I used it quite a lot for inspiration. It was, I think, one of the best resources that I found online in terms of how much detail it gave. But still, I think I was missing so much. And one of the biggest things that I was missing myself when I was applying was the examples of letters and of other documents. And a lot of the stuff I had to invent myself. I think I found a couple of examples later somewhere online. But the thing with them is that the Tech Nation, they are really very strict about people not plagiarizing the letters. So I think that a lot of people are scared of sharing their letters so that others don't just copy them. So I think that it's good that now, hopefully, into the one you have 2 days. So in 2 days, there will be a new resource for people to get inspired. But always make sure that if you're using the resources that you find online, that you always rewrite them in your own voice, to just use them for inspiration and for structure, but don't ever copy any document that you find online for this visa, because this visa it has to be about you and about your case. If you copy paste something, then there's a chance that somebody else will do the same thing, and then both of you will get rejected. And I think here in the UK, this stuff is taken pretty seriously. So I would strongly advise against that. But it's great to have resources, and it's great to have help and assistance. And I think that this is generally one of the biggest gaps in this whole process, at least for me. So the hardest things, I think, for both of us, kind of getting our head wrapped around which documents we need, what they should look like. So there is one question that is kind of top of mind probably for some people who are listening to this. Did you face any kind of difficulties throughout the process as a Russian citizen?
And that's a good one. I think that nowadays there's a huge misconception that, at least in Russian circles and Russian-speaking circles, that, well, especially with the recent events when some visas have been denied in Europe, that it should be harder to get into the UK, especially if you want to work here. But I'm going to link a statement from Tech Nation themselves in the comments, and they clearly state that it's actually the opposite. They are prioritizing applications from Ukrainian nationals and from Belarus and Russian nationals. So different governments can have different policies, but people at Tech Nation, they understand that, well, we as single human beings were not responsible for the actions of some elites of the government, and probably the best way to undermine the regime is to facilitate the brain leak. And that's exactly what they're trying to do, in my view. So no, I didn't face any challenges, any problems, because I still am a Russian national. And if it's the only thing that's stopping you from applying, I'd encourage you to change your mind. I mean, at the end, even if you're being denied. It's only money, and it's not that much money that would change your life, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that the same goes through for people, for citizens of Belarus, like me. They also might be scared of getting refusals because there is, similar sanctions being applied. This is not the case in the UK, but as I like to say, it's not the case yet. So we don't know what will happen in the future. But I think that overall, the opportunity to immigrate to the UK is there right now. So if you are interested and if you're curious to apply and kind of try to move here, this is a good moment to try. So one of I think my last question is, are there any tips or maybe one piece of advice that you would like to share with somebody who is thinking of applying for this visa?
Um, well, I'm not sure if we missed anything during our interview, but probably I'd like to reiterate on the single thought that is the most important in my view is that if you don't have a case, build it. If you already have a case, just try. And if you're being refused, then try again. I didn't see any guidance on how many times you could try. You could probably try to look it up on Technation website or even email them directly, but I don't see why you couldn't try and try again until you succeed.
Yeah, definitely. I think that building your case is something that a lot of people can. It would be actually much easier for them than they think. And this is kind of my moment to plug my thing. So actually, I plan to continue sharing a lot of information on my YouTube channel that I shared already and here on LinkedIn about the visa and how you can build a stronger case for it. But I also have this idea of a paid product that I for now call the Global Talent Visa Bootcamp, that will help software engineers build a stronger case for this visa. So it is early stage, but you can already sign up for the waitlist if you're interested to be, the first one notified when it launches. So I just drop a link to that in the chat. We'll be glad to see you sign up, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, and there I'd also like to add, guys, that you don't really have to have like 10 years of experience. Nadia, how many years of experience do you have? Really?
It's 4 years. Yeah.
So it's 4 years of experience, and you don't have a degree in computer science, right?
No, I'm
So
self-taught.
yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah.
yeah, you can be a self-taught programmer with 3, 4 years of experience and still get this visa if you invest enough effort. So I think that the bootcamp that Nadia is going to lead probably could give you an
Yeah, I think
extensive number of
it's
tips.
actually. Yeah, thank you. I think it's an important point is that you don't have to be not only a genius, but also you don't really have to be a computer science graduate, and you don't really have to work at big name companies, like Meta, Facebook. You need to have experience working in product companies, and this is important. So this is one thing that if you only have experience working in consultancies, this will likely be a problem for this visa. But other than that, you can work at smaller startups. It's okay. The startup can be anywhere. There is no discrimination in terms of where the company is. So it's very open to people from different backgrounds, different nationalities. Also, there is no requirement when it comes to education. You don't need to have a CS degree or any kind of degree at all for this visa. So I think it's pretty amazing that at the same time, their demands are very high for this visa, but also it's kind of I think it's very meritocratic in a way. It's very, again, permissionless. You can just start doing the things and then get the visa. You don't have to go to school to get a degree for 4 years to do that. So this is something that I'm personally very passionate about, and I think that many more people can apply for this visa than currently do. And the number of people who apply for the Global Talent Visa is still shockingly low. Hopefully we can fix that.
Yeah,
I
be
suggest
cool,
we
be
look
like
at the.
Nadia.
Thank you. I think so. We can look at the questions now and see whether we had.
Yeah. Scrolling all
Can
the way to the top.
Yes. Okay. So. Okay, there was one question to you. Is JavaScript the language most popular in the UK?
Honestly, I have no idea. I think that my kind of perception of the UK tech scene is kind of skewed because of the place I work at, and there, I think the most popular language is Hack, which is our own um, derivative from PHP. It's kind of strictly typed PHP, so I have no idea, but I'd say that probably most of the world runs on JavaScript now, so JavaScript is a good bet.
Yeah, I think it's the most popular language in the world. So here as well. Okay, the other question was from Arsan. The only thing that concerns me with the UK and Europe in general is that you pay around 40% in income taxes, right? So if you make 50K annually, you only get 300. 500K, you only get 300K. Have you thought about countries like Dubai, Poland, etc.?
And I think that this question could be best answered by you. You were in Poland. You have the
Yeah.
right to live in Poland. So why did you move?
Yeah, so basically in Poland, you can have your own company, kind of similar to the UK sole tradership. So basically, when you don't have a company, but you sell your services as a physical entity, not as a legal entity. So you sell it as yourself. So this way, you can have a company, and you only pay 17% tax. So, and this is what I did actually with one of my jobs. It was, pretty great. I'm not gonna lie. And also with this arrangement, you can also pay lower healthcare charges as well. So this was nice. In the UK, the taxes are higher, so most programmers, I would say, fall into the 40% income tax. So it's obviously a lot of money, and then there is the healthcare charges on top of that. For me, the decision to come here wasn't driven by the desire to optimize my taxes. So there were other priorities. So I knew that I would pay a lot of money in tax. But also, the UK is not the worst country in Europe. So I think that in terms of income taxes, it's one of the better countries. Switzerland is better, actually. So that could be an option. But yeah, this is what it is. The taxes are high. They are rising as well.
For me, probably the real reason was, well, yes, you can save on taxes if you move somewhere else. Well, I could save even more on taxes if I stayed in Russia. But I wanted my children to be native in English. I also wanted to improve my English. Um, and I kind of felt that there are more opportunities here in London, or maybe in the US, maybe in Canada. So I think it's easier to land a big job with sophisticated tasks here in London, or maybe somewhere in New York or San Francisco than if you're working remotely. When you're working remotely, well, yes, currently Meta is hiring remotely, and that's great. But if you live somewhere Eastern, you're going to have even bigger time difference with the US, where the most teams are residing, and then you're probably going to have troubles communicating to them. So I think it's just, for me, it was native English and probably the scale of opportunities that are here.
Yeah, definitely. I think that also it's for your CV. I think that working in a city like London at a prestigious company is a huge asset that you can later use to get a better paying job, and later you can relocate. I think that in terms of career opportunities, it's still a great place to be, especially when you're young. And the level of living, I think, just the general, I think the quality of life that you can get here, I think, is pretty high overall. Um, there was another question about the work visas, which companies are sponsoring. So I will just drop a link to a full list of all the companies that have the official license to sponsor the skilled worker visa. So you can check that out. Okay, there was another mention that somebody's looking to move to the UK with a global talent visa. That's great. I hope this stream was useful. And what else? Do we have something else? I don't think we have any more questions.
Yeah, I
Do we
think
have
this is
anybody
it.
still on? Yeah. Yeah, if you have questions to us afterwards, you can continue asking them here in chat. I think it still stays alive, just like regular comments. You can also message us directly here on LinkedIn. So let's send our LinkedIn profiles here. Which way would you prefer people to contact you in the future?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn sounds good.
Yeah, cool. Hope this was useful and you learned something and enjoyed it. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much, Andrey, for being here and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure. And
Thank you.
yeah,
Bye.
for everyone who's watching us here, have a good day and goodbye.
Have a good day. Bye.